Hello, my name is Paul Marchbanks, and this is Digging in the Dirt with another entry on representations of disability in films of the United States. Today I'm going to talk about the 1944 American production of Gaslight. Though no poet, I have attempted poetry writing a few times in my life. One of my earlier efforts followed an extraordinarily profound moment of connection with a friend. A moment that involved no words or touch, just a sustained stretch of time in which we peered into one another's eyes without blinking. This was no staring contest, but something unplanned, which just happened while sitting across from each other. I'd never done this before, and my high school self was struck by how I could feel, simultaneously, utterly exposed and silently affirmed by such a subtle exchange. Though I didn't talk with her about the experience directly, I did immediately go home and write a 12-line lyrical poem. No worries, I'll spare you the reading of this adolescent artifact. This one brief and intense moment was probably my first glimpse of how beautiful and vulnerable intimacy can be. At a pivotal moment in George Cukor's Gaslight, released in 1944, one character turns to another and asks them to look into their eyes. It's a rather tense scene, one in which both characters have much to lose, or gain, depending on the outcome. It's also the culmination of a pattern of interactions in which one character has implicitly trusted the other, gazing with fondness and desire into an attractive face that presumably has long signaled a generous and affectionate heart. It's difficult to say too much about the film's characters without divulging spoilers, so bear with me as I attempt to orbit the plot without landing directly on it. In 1979, academics Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar published The Mad Woman in the Attic, an important book of feminist literary criticism which examined a number of power imbalances found in Victorian fiction and poetry, unequal romantic pairings characterized by abuses of power. Their work proved influential not just because of what it revealed about the status of women in a bygone era during which they had neither the vote nor legal access to money they earned, but because of what it implied about the enduring power of sexism after women gained certain rights in the 20th century. Gilbert and Gubar focused on the abuses suffered by women with good reason. History demanded, and continues to demand, a reckoning. In the film industry itself, women integral to the creation of the earliest films were forced out of positions of influence once powerful men recognized the rising cachet of cinema. For the next 100 years, women fought hard to become screenwriters and directors, to maintain acting careers after the youthful beauty so prized by audiences had faded, and to earn wages equal to those of their male counterparts. As in many other areas of American culture, injustice has often swung in men's favor. To merely cast women as weak and innocent victims, however, would be to disenfranchise them in yet another way, would be just as prejudicial as casting them all as femme fatales, as duplicitous, sexually aggressive narcissists. Historically speaking, however, complexity has often flown out the window when Hollywood got hold of a best-selling novel or successful play and adapted it for the silver screen. Gaslight was a British play and British film before it migrated to the States. Both negligence and politically charged righteous anger on the part of filmmakers can result in flattened characterization, turning suffering heroes and often villainous aggressors into two-dimensional caricatures. And, truth be told, simplicity sells. Is Cukor's version of Gaslight such a two-dimensional tale, or does it boast enviable nuance? Does it dramatize troubled intimacy between two lovers in a way that humanizes them both, or does it function as a one-sided polemic? What was actually needed back in the 1940s? Even-handed narratives that dramatize the faults and strengths of both partners, or those that spotlighted the wrongdoings of one side of such conflicts? What is needed today? Please indulge this wannabe marriage counselor, as he suggests a few principles important for maintaining health within a long-term relationship. Principles most definitely at work in the 1944 version of Gaslight. Principle number 1. We all need space to think about big decisions without others' needs, desires, and competing opinions constantly pressing in on us. A few people somehow manage to retreat into a private headspace while still surrounded by friends and family, but many of us need semi-regular time alone before we can make wise decisions. Meditation, prayer, and other forms of introspective reflection insist on a hiatus from schedules, responsibilities, and noise. When others, including those closest to us, choose not to respect our boundaries and allow for such alone time, it takes a toll on our productivity and creativity, our emotional health, and our mental equilibrium. Being surrounded at all times can literally unhinge us. Consider the mental asylum, a site where illness has often been fostered and even created instead of alleviated. For centuries, the public considered these institutions more as repositories for inconvenient family members than centers for curative therapy. Individuals placed within what were once called madhouses and loony bins could develop inside an institution's walls the very mental imbalance they supposedly had when first committed. Due to poor funding, overcrowding was a given, making it challenging for patients to hold on to normality and any ingrained sense of self, and worsening whatever cognitive problems they might actually have had upon entry. The cacophony of a loud crowd is a poor substitute for quiet caregiving, whether one lives in an institution or outside one. Principle number 2. We all need community to help us process our thoughts and feelings, to provide alternative perspectives so that we don't breathe and exhale the same stale air repeatedly. Lack of connection can be just as detrimental to mental stability as the absence of solitude. Growth requires the regular presence of someone whose viewpoint we trust, whom we know will listen, counsel, and occasionally interrogate. Iron sharpens iron, as an ancient philosopher once noted. Healthy, spark-generating, heat-inducing conflict can refine and strengthen the individual mind as much as sincere affirmation. In the absence of support and resistance, vitality fades, and confidence seeps away. Depending on our temperament, large-scale interactivity may prove just as necessary as the private tete-a-tete. This is most definitely true for the protagonist of Gaslight. Parties, concerts, walks through a bustling town all hold the promise of much-needed social contact. As John Donne once contended, quote, "No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main." The poet's comment about the impact of a single death posits what chaos theory will later validate. Everything and everyone plays an important role in life's complex tapestry. Principle number 3. Last, but far from least, let's recall a truth as obvious as the others I've mentioned, something to which anyone who's been in a committed relationship can attest. Intimacy entrusts both partners with an incredible amount of influence over one another's well-being. When our beloved feels anxious, we can work to allay their distress by reminding them of their own competence, or we can stoke their fear by recalling previous failures. If we treat them as generally incapable of caring for themselves and take too many measures to serve, protect, and carry them, they may lose confidence in the efficacy of their own actions. Or we can more overtly undercut their understanding of the world by rejecting their ideas, questioning their motives, and mocking their perception of reality. Just yesterday, Tracy and I disagreed about the color of some Post-it notes. I maintained that what she considered purple was actually blue. Now, all kinds of factors can play into such disagreement, including one's own eyesight, culturally divergent definitions of color, and the fact that hue is somewhat relative unless you're using an electronic colorimeter. Imagine, however, living with someone who constantly told you that, say, blue is actually yellow. In the absence of a third party to arbitrate, you might begin to doubt your understanding of the terms, mistrust your own senses, and even question the reliability of your own mental processes. Usually, mental illness is a product of genetics, trauma, and environmental conditions outside any one individual's control. Sometimes it's not.